Joining me now is former federal prosecutor David Weinstein. David, thank you so much for your time. Before we start, we just heard from Brian Entin there. Should cameras be allowed inside the courtroom?
Well, Nichole, thanks for having me. They're allowed in state courtrooms. And so it's a courtroom. The only issue I really have is that, unfortunately, when there's a camera in the courtroom, the people who are in front of the camera play to the camera and not to what they're supposed to be doing and what they're focusing on. I don't disagree with Alan Dershowitz. I think for the American public to see exactly what happened in the courtroom, they need to be in the courtroom to see it happening. So although they don't allow cameras in the federal courtrooms, it may be coming time for the judges to make a decision about allowing them in. I don't think that Judge Cannon can make this decision on her own. I think it's going to have to be the judges of the district collectively together deciding whether they're going to break that rule, and not only in this case, but in every case that occurs in their courtrooms to allow cameras in.
Yeah, this really could be unprecedented in that it changes some of these rules in federal court. So as we know right now, no gag order has been issued in this case. Last night, the former president unleashing on the special counsel in the investigation, Jack Smith. We're talking insults, personal attacks. Let's listen to a portion of that.
The prosecutor in the case, I will call it our case, is a thug. I've named him Deranged Jack Smith. He's a behind-the-scenes guy, but his record is absolutely atrocious. He does political hit jobs, and we can take it. But what these thugs have done to my family is a disgrace.
Well, David, we know that the former president certainly we're used to him lashing out at those he deems as enemies. But in this case, lashing out against the special counsel, could it impact the case against him?
Well, it shouldn't impact the case against him. I have to think that the special counsel has a thick skin and he's not listening to what's said. But it could affect potential jurors in the case and what they think about the prosecution and what the prosecution has done here. And while it's not a legal reason, perhaps, for a juror to feel one way or the other, it might influence their ability. We're supposed to try our cases inside the courtroom. And that means that we should say things in our pleadings, and we should say things in open court based on what's in the pleadings. We shouldn't be talking about our cases outside of the courtroom, and we certainly shouldn't be talking about the people who are on the other side of the V, and certainly not in the harsh terms that we just heard the former president talking about the special prosecutor. There's no place for that within our system, whether it's a civil case or a criminal case. Your case is tried on the facts and the evidence in the courtroom, and it would appear from the outset that he is going to be a difficult client to keep under control. And if, in fact, there is a gag order, I see him having to appear back in front of the court a number of times to be advised and admonished about what he should and shouldn't be saying when he's outside the courtroom.
Well, my follow-up to that then, David, do you think a gag order will be implemented in this case?
I think that the judge's trial order will tell people what they can say and where they can say. And the long lawyerly answer is yes. The shorter answer is exactly that. Yes, I think that the judge will clamp down on what is being said outside of the courtroom. We saw that happen in Roger Stone's case, in the Rocket Docket in Virginia. We saw some of that trying to happen in the case pending in New York. And again, judges control their courtroom, so they want to control what's said in their courtroom and outside of their courtroom. And I think to keep the rhetoric from spinning out of control, I think there is going to be some sort of an order that's going to need to be entered with regard to what the parties should be saying, not only about the people on the other side, but about the evidence they're reviewing. Remember, they're going to be looking at classified documents.
Right.
Nobody should be talking about those outside of the courtroom.
Well, again, you are a former federal prosecutor. My last question for you, David. There's this argument that the former president is not the only politician to have classified information, but he is the one being taken to task. Two wrongs obviously do not necessarily make a right, or two alleged wrongs don't make a right. But from your perspective, is there some credence to that argument that he is the one being prosecuted or attempting to be prosecuted?
Well, let's go back to two wrongs don't make a right. My mom and dad have always told me that from the time I was a small child. And I don't think we're looking at two wrongs making a right here. I think that you have to look at the different facts and circumstances about the different investigations that are taking place with people who had documents after they were in a position to have classified documents? Did they respond quickly? Did they respond honestly? Did they turn over all the documents?
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.